The call came from the co-op. A local farmer, Harold Greaves, hadn't shown up in over a week. No deliveries, no calls, not answering his radio. And that wasn't like Harold. Say what you want about him. Loner, hard-ass, borderline feral. But he was dependable. Showed up on time, always had good cuts, never said much more than he needed to. When people like him disappear, it usually means one of two things: injury or foul play. So we drove out. His property sat 10 miles outside of town, down a gravel road that split off into brush. The gate was chained but unlocked. Cattle hadn't been seen in the pasture for weeks. Everything felt still. House was dark. No signs of entry, but no lights either. We checked inside. Dust on every counter, dishes in the sink, coffee grounds molded over. No blood, no struggle. Just like someone stood up mid-meal and never came back. Behind the house was the barn. Beyond that, the old butcher's shed. The locals called it that because Harold processed his own meat, sold beef, pork, and venison under the table. Not illegal, just unlicensed. Folks liked his product better than what came out of the grocery store, said it tasted cleaner. That shed always smelled like iron and smoke, like blood baked into the floor. But this time, it was different. The smell hit us before we even opened the door. Acrid, decay with a chemical edge, like rot trying to mask itself with bleach. Inside, it was colder than it should have been. Meat lockers lined the back wall, 4 of them, heavy steel with industrial locks, all sealed. We checked the shelves first. Nothing out of the ordinary. Cutting tables, knives, bone saws. Nothing to suggest foul play until we got to the 3rd locker. Its seal was broken. Inside were packages, dozens, wrapped in thick butcher paper, tied with twine. No labels, no dates, just cold white bundles stacked neatly from top to bottom. We opened one. At first glance it looked like beef, deep red, marbled, but the texture was off, more fibrous, more pale around the edges. We opened another, still red, still wrong. The 3rd one had something in it. A finger, cleanly severed. Pink nail, calloused knuckle, still intact. We stepped back, radioed it in, secured the scene. Forensics confirmed it later. Human tissue, several cuts, at least 3 different DNA profiles. One of them female. One matching a John Doe found 2 counties over. They never confirmed the 3rd. The worst part? Most of the packages hadn't been touched. He'd been stockpiling, freezing them, labeling them mentally maybe. Maybe not at all. We searched the property for graves. Found 2 behind the tree line, shallow, unmarked. Inside were bones, cleaned, bleached. No heads. Just spines curled like snakes, hands folded over ribs like someone thought they were doing the right thing. Neighbors said Harold was a quiet guy. Never saw anyone come or go. No visitors. No drama. One neighbor swore they heard screaming late at night, but assumed it was coyotes. Another said they saw Harold dragging a tarp once, didn't ask questions. That's the thing about small towns. People know when to keep their heads down. The state came in after that. Big trucks, blue jackets, masks and gloves. They took everything. The lockers, the knives, the finger, and then they left. We never got a name for what happened. No motive, no cause of death for the bodies. Just a notice from the AG's office that the investigation was ongoing, and all local files were sealed. A month later, the barn burned down. No suspects, no accelerant found. Just a pile of ash where the shed used to be. The property's still empty. Grass growing tall over the bones. The gates rusted shut now. Cattle fence collapsing. No buyers. But sometimes, if you drive by at night, you can see it. The glow of a light. Faint. Flickering. Like a freezer door still cracked open. Like something inside's waiting to be counted. We don't talk about Harold anymore, but none of us buy meat from backyard farms either. Not after what we found in the butcher's shed. It started with a call from a lookout tower. A seasonal fire ranger, young guy named Reese, radioed dispatch saying he'd picked up a garbled distress signal on an old emergency band. Shortwave frequency. Faint. Patchy. Not standard. It had looped twice before cutting out. 2 words were clear. Help. Bleeding. At first, we thought it was static or prank chatter. It happens. People screw with old towers, especially ones that still scan analog bands. But then Reese called again, shaken. Said he traced the signal's origin to a ranger station deep in the Eastern District. Station 17. Only problem? Station 17 had been shut down for 12 years. It had been abandoned after a landslide wiped out the access road and a portion of the foundation. Officially condemned. No staff, no power, no trail upkeep. We sent 2 units to investigate. Deputy Vale and I led the response. The hike in was rough. The road had long since washed out, so we went in on foot. Took nearly an hour. No birds, no wind, just the thick sound of branches brushing our uniforms and the buzz of old bugs we couldn't see. When we reached the clearing, we froze. The station was still standing, barely. Porch collapsed, windows cracked, the roof slouched to one side like it had given up halfway through dying. But the door? Closed. And through the warped boards, we could hear it. The static hum of a radio, still transmitting. We approached slowly, weapons drawn. Inside, everything was dust and mildew. Mold climbed up the walls. A chair lay overturned, coffee mugs fossilized on the shelf. And at the center of it all, an old dispatch radio, plugged into a backup battery unit, still buzzing, still live. The mic was pinned down, stuck in transmission mode, held in place by a severed thumb, fresh. Blood still wet on the mic and smeared across the desk. No body, no signs of a struggle, just a thumb, gray with shock, nail cracked, rough calluses on the side like it belonged to someone who used their hands for a living. Vale stepped outside and lost his lunch in the grass. I couldn't blame him. I radioed it in, kept my voice level, tried not to stare too long at the handprint on the floor, dragging away from the desk like someone tried to crawl. We swept the rest of the cabin. No one inside. Nothing disturbed. Nothing missing. Except the windows were all nailed shut from the inside, and the only unlocked door was the one we came through. The back door had 2 deadbolts, a bar latch, and a metal crossbar drilled into the frame. Whoever had been in there didn't want to get out. They wanted to keep something else out. We followed the handprint trail to the back corner, where it ended in a cluster of scratches in the floorboards, like someone digging, desperate. And next to it, a piece of paper, water-stained, torn. Stop broadcasting. It finds the signal. No name, no date, just that. We returned to the mic, took photos, bagged the thumb, still transmitting, still open. I asked the rangers about the station's history. They said Station 17 was shut down in 2009 after a freak equipment fire. Official story was electrical failure. But off the record, they found a ranger dead in the crawl space, burned alive. Except there had been no fire in the crawl space, only upstairs, and no one could explain how the door had been locked from the outside. We asked if anyone had been dispatched to 17 recently. Number: no known patrols, no volunteers, no scheduled visits. But the generator in the back had half a tank of fuel, fresh. And the fridge? 1 unopened bottle of water, still cold. Someone had been there. Recently. That night, after returning to the station, I tried to sleep. Didn't happen. I kept thinking about the radio. Why would someone crawl back into an abandoned station? Why would they trap themselves inside? Why would they broadcast, even after losing their thumb? Then the reports started coming in. Other towers picking up strange signals. Short bursts, whispers. Sometimes a name. Sometimes just crying. One tower, West Point 3, reported static at 3:14 a.m. Their ranger stepped outside to check the antenna and never came back. When they found him, his radio was crushed, bent inward, and his shoes were missing, placed neatly by the tower ladder. The official stance is that Station 17 is permanently sealed, but sometimes, on night patrol, I scan the old bands, and sometimes I hear it again, that same faint whisper. Help, bleeding. And when I do, I turn it off, because maybe they weren't calling for help. Maybe they were calling it. It was opening day of hunting season when the call came in. 2 locals were out before sunrise. Seasoned guys, quiet types. They'd set up in the Western Ridge, deep into county land where most people don't bother hiking anymore. They were tracking a buck when one of them spotted something in the trees. At first he thought it was a dummy, but it wasn't. It was a body, nailed to a pine tree with what looked like 2 railroad spikes through the shoulders. Shirtless, skin pale, hands slack at his sides, mouth frozen in a half scream. And above him, maybe 10 feet up, was an old deer stand, rotting, rusted, but clearly used. When we got there, I recognized the body before I even stepped out of the cruiser. It was Darren Lowe. He'd been missing for almost exactly a year. One of those cases that sits in your drawer and haunts you after hours. Not because it's complicated, but because it never made sense. He wasn't the type to disappear. No debts, no trouble, no reason. Just gone one day. And now, here he was, nailed to a tree like a trophy. We roped off the scene. Forensics said he'd been dead less than 24 hours, a year missing. And he turns up freshly killed, nailed up like some backwoods crucifix. We climbed the ladder into the stand. Inside, a rusted thermos, a 5-gallon bucket, half full of waste, and a notebook. Weather-worn but mostly intact. Cover read, "Property of D. Lowe, do not remove." We opened it. The first few pages were harmless. Hunting entries, scouting times, feeding paths, standard stuff. Then it shifted. Day 22. I hear it again. Steps under the stand. Heavy. Day 49. Food's low. Too scared to leave. Don't want to lose the spot. Day 103. Something moves different. Not like deer. Too careful. Day 198. I think it's watching from the east tree line now. There were no drawings, no rants, just clinical daily logs. Page after page of waiting, of watching. Then the final entry. Day 378. Finally got one. No detail, no location. Just that sentence. Below it, a smear of something brown-red across the page. Blood, maybe, maybe not. We tested the thermos. Water, still sealed. Nothing unusual. But the bucket? There were bits of shredded paper in the bottom. Burned edges. Pages that had been ripped from the middle of the journal. Someone tried to hide something. Or erase it. We brought in Darren's sister to ID the body. She wept but confirmed it. Said he'd gone out to get something off his chest. That he wasn't right those last few weeks. When we asked what that meant, she said he kept asking weird questions. Like whether she'd ever felt like someone else was inside her skin. Or if she believed things live longer in the woods than people do. That was the phrase that stuck. We searched the area for miles around the deer stand, found 4 more similar structures, all abandoned, all facing inward, toward the center of a clearing we hadn't noticed before. Like some kind of circle, a hunting perimeter. But there were no carcasses, no bones, no signs of animals at all. Just silence, stillness, like the forest was holding something in its lungs. After the coroner confirmed Darren's time of death, we reviewed satellite photos. 2 weeks before his death, a new heat signature had appeared near the stand. Roughly human-sized. It stayed in the same place every night. Then disappeared the morning Darren died. We haven't found any fresh prints, no hair, no blood. But we did find something else. Behind the tree where he was nailed, we found a carving. Deep, rough, a symbol. 3 vertical lines intersected by 1 horizontal slash. Primitive. Deliberate. Not recent. We sent it to the state. No match in any known databases. But that didn't stop the rumors. Locals say the stand was cursed. That Darren wasn't hunting for something. He was keeping something in. That the stand was never for game. It was a post. A prison. A watchtower. And the final entry, finally got one, wasn't victory. It was warning. We burned the stand. Sealed the area. But the next week, one of our deputies, Anders, started acting strange. Kept showing up at odd hours, staring at the tree line behind the station, whispering things under his breath. We pulled him off duty. Found a copy of Darren's journal printed out in his cruiser. Said he just wanted to see for himself. He's since moved out of state. Doesn't return calls. And sometimes, when the radio cuts out late at night, I think about Darren, perched up there for almost a year, living in that stand, watching, waiting, trying to keep something from coming closer. And I wonder if whatever it was just kept moving to the next watcher. A property owner on the north side of the county, old farmland long since swallowed up by woods, reported movement on one of his trail cams. Said he hadn't leased the land in years and didn't recognize the figure. Just a blurry silhouette near the tree line, right before the battery died. We figured it was squatters or kids partying off-grid. Deputy Henley and I drove out early the next morning. We expected to find a burned-out fire ring, maybe a tent. What we found was something else entirely. The woods were dense, unused, no tire tracks. But we followed the direction the camera had faced and came across what looked like a hunting blind. Just a small wooden shed, half buried under ivy. The door was padlocked, but the lock was shiny, newer than anything else out there. Henley cut it open. Inside was a staircase, concrete, going down. We radioed it in, requested backup, and descended. At the base of the stairs was a steel door. We forced it open. What we stepped into felt like another world. An underground compound, fully built, 10-foot ceilings, fluorescent lights, fresh air circulation. The first room was a hallway, smooth concrete, clean, recently swept. 4 doors, one slightly ajar. Behind it, a stockpile of supplies, canned food, bottled water, medical kits, stacked neatly, categorized, everything labeled with date stamps and expiry logs. We kept going. The third room was dark. Henley flipped the switch, and then we saw them. 6 women, inside cages. Each cage was 6 feet wide, bolted into the floor. No bedding, no furniture, just blankets, a bucket in each corner. Some had water bottles, others didn't. The women didn't move when we entered, didn't speak, didn't even look at us at first. They were malnourished, eyes sunken, hair uneven, like someone had cut it in the dark. When they did look up, it was cautious, like they didn't believe we were real. Henley stepped forward, soft voice. "We're here to help." One of them flinched so hard, she hit the bars. Another reached for the lock but froze mid-motion. None of them spoke. We called in medics, cleared the rest of the compound, found no sign of a captor, no bedrooms, no bathroom, just more food, more surveillance equipment, and maps. Maps of the county, marked trails, timestamps, 12 flash drives. When tech reviewed the drives, they found hundreds of hours of footage, all surveillance, trails, campsites, grocery store parking lots, people being followed. Most footage centered on women, alone, jogging, shopping, filling gas, walking their dogs, stalked, watched, labeled. Not one shot showed the cameraman, but we knew what they were building, a catalog. The women didn't speak, not at first. Physically, they could, but it was like they'd been trained out of it, or punished for trying. Days passed before one of them finally wrote something down. "Don't put us on TV." When asked why, she wrote, "He'll come back." That phrase came up again, from 2 others. "He'll come back. We've run DNA, photos, facial recognition, nothing. No missing persons matches, no fingerprints on record, no family claims. They're ghosts, just like whoever put them down there. The construction alone must have taken months, maybe years." Concrete had been poured professionally, air system ducted, water stored, rotated. This wasn't thrown together. It was planned. Whoever built it had resources, discipline, and one goal: containment. And for how long? No one knows. The medics estimate the women had been held anywhere from 3 months to several years. One had healed fractures. Another had old scars along her ribs. Scalpel marks, the coroner said. Precise, clean, like someone had practiced. And still, the women don't tell us much. Just, there were more. Different place. He moved them. We've searched every square mile of that land. Nothing. No other hatches, no other rooms. But we all know this wasn't the only one. You don't build a prison that efficient for just 6 people, and you don't vanish into thin air unless you've done it before. The sheriff's office issued a statement calling it a suspected human trafficking site. But we know better. This wasn't trafficking. There were no chains, no drugs, no money. Just silence. And systems. Whoever ran it didn't want to sell them. He wanted to keep them, study them, control them. And when he thought we were getting close, he disappeared. Left them there like pieces on a board he'd grown tired of playing with. No prints, no footage of his face, just absence. And a metal tag on the back of each cage. Serial numbers, sequential, starting at 14, which means there were at least 13 others before them, and probably more after. We never found him. The land's been seized, the compound sealed. But the women still wake up screaming some nights. They point at shadows, ask if the air vents are watching, and we still get reports from hikers, seeing strange men on the ridge. Lone figures standing just out of focus, watching from the trees. We always check, but by the time we get there, they're gone, somewhere underground, waiting, building the next room. We got the call early one morning after a storm rolled through. Public Works found the body, lying face up in a drainage ditch behind the old mill road. Mud-covered, half submerged in runoff. It had rained so hard that night the creek jumped its banks and forced debris into the storm system. Someone thought they saw a boot, then they realized it was a leg. When we got there, I expected the usual. Drifter, overdose. Maybe someone dumped post-mortem. But the second I saw his face, I knew this wasn't a standard case. He had no eyes. Not gouged out. Removed. Cleanly. Surgically. Skin around the sockets was unbroken. No tears. No trauma. Just 2 smooth hollows where his eyes used to be. Like someone had carved them out with precision and patience, and then kept him alive long enough for the wounds to heal. He had no ID. No wallet. No phone. No tattoos. No scars. Just a faded green t-shirt, jeans, and boots with the laces removed. His hands were calloused, fingertips scarred from what looked like burns, palms blistered. But the weirdest thing? His body showed no signs of decomposition. For someone left in runoff water for what we assumed was a few days, he was in remarkably good shape. Me put time of death between 48 to 72 hours prior. But when they got inside, the findings changed everything. Whoever this man was, he'd lost his eyes at least a week before he died. The tissue had healed. There were no signs of infection, no damage to his brain, no drugs in his system. They said he hadn't been sedated. He'd been awake. Forensic pathologist told us, off the record, that the removal was as clean as any operating room procedure. But there were no anesthesia markers in the blood, no signs of restraint. We canvassed the area. No tire tracks, no nearby cameras. Just a patch of woods and that ditch. Neighbors said they didn't hear anything the night before. One man claimed he heard soft singing out near the trees around 3 a.m., but chalked it up to wind. We sent fingerprints and DNA through every database. Nothing. No matches in criminal, military, immigration, or medical systems. Not even a missing persons report with a close resemblance. He wasn't in the system. Not anywhere. After 2 weeks, we brought in a forensic artist to reconstruct the face, built composite sketches, released them through the news and national bulletins. Nothing. The press dubbed him the No-Eyed Man. Someone even made a podcast episode about it, but all it did was generate noise, theories, urban legend talk, nothing useful. 2 months after the body was found, we got a call from a woman in Ohio. Said her son had gone missing 3 months prior. Matched the height, building age range. We brought her in. She took one look at the photo and said, "That's not him. His jaw's too tight." Another dead end. What kept bothering us, me especially, was the timing. Why remove someone's eyes and keep them alive for a week? Why go through that much trouble? And why no ransom, no message, no claim? Serial killers usually escalate. But this wasn't escalation. It felt methodical. Like whoever did this didn't want attention. They wanted something else. We checked medical supply inventories across 3 states. No unusual orders, no missing tools. But we did find something else. A clinic about 40 miles from the ditch had reported a break-in 6 weeks earlier. Nothing was taken, but the logbook had been tampered with. One name scratched out, one patient record file missing. The patient, unidentified walk-in, no insurance, paid cash, showed signs of recent neurological trauma but refused treatment. Staff said he was jittery, kept flinching, said, "They're in the walls," and asked if anyone had seen his reflection moving out of sync. He left before the doctor could finish the exam. We tried to get the security footage. Corrupted. Only thing that remained was the audio. At one point you can hear the man ask, "How long can a person live without seeing it?" Then silence. Then a voice, not his, barely audible. "Longer than you think." The ME eventually ruled the cause of death as exposure and dehydration. But that didn't answer the bigger question. Why remove his eyes a full week before letting him die? One theory floated around the office quietly. That maybe the man asked for it. That maybe he saw something he couldn't unsee, and the removal wasn't punishment. It was prevention. A way to make sure it never saw him again. We can't prove it. There's nothing in his stomach contents to suggest forced isolation. No signs of a holding location, no rope fibers, no bruises. He just shows up, surgically altered, alone, then dumped. The drainage ditch has since been covered, but I still drive past it sometimes, and I think about his face, and how calm he looked in the end. Like someone who had finally gotten free of something the rest of us haven't noticed yet. Something we're still looking directly at. The call came from a hiker. Said he found something deep in the woods, way off trail. His voice cracked when he said it, like he didn't want to describe it over the phone. "A bus," he said. "A school bus. It's just sitting out here." We pulled the coordinates and sent a team. Deputy Morales and I got there first. It took us over an hour on foot. No access roads, no signs of tire tracks, just thick brush, damp ground, and the kind of silence that settles deep into your ears and makes everything feel just a little too still. Then we saw it. A yellow school bus, or what was left of it. Rust had eaten through the lower panels. Vines wrapped around the frame like they'd been growing through the windows for decades. Moss coated the roof, and the front windshield was cracked but mostly intact. It didn't belong there. No signs of a crash, no broken branches, no gouged earth. It looked like it had been placed there, intentionally. We stepped closer, weapons holstered, flashlights out. The paint had faded to a sickly gray yellow. The side read, Greenville Consolidated District 14. But here's the thing. Greenville doesn't have a District 14. It never did. We tried the door. Jammed. Morales climbed in through the broken emergency exit at the rear. I followed. Inside was worse. The seats were still bolted in, ripped, molded, torn apart like animals had made nests in them years ago. And in the aisle, dozens of children's shoes, small, scattered. Some laid out in pairs, others kicked to the side. No socks, no clothes, just shoes. And carved into the metal paneling at the back of the bus, etched over and over again like someone couldn't stop, were 4 words. Stay silent, stay small. Over and over, in different sizes, different depths. Some so deep they'd bent the metal inward. We backed out, carefully. Neither of us said what we were thinking. We radioed it in. Forensics. Search and rescue. Crime scene. The team came in quiet. Nobody joked. Nobody said what we were all thinking. Where are the bodies? Back at the station we started digging. Historical maps. Newspaper archives. Old transportation logs. There was no record of a missing bus in this region. No mass disappearances. Nothing in the news. Nothing in the sheriff's logs. It was like the bus had never existed. We contacted Greenville's oldest residents, one by one. Most didn't know what we were talking about. One man, Harold Bell, 91 years old and sharp as a tack, froze when we mentioned the words on the wall. He sat forward, quiet, said, That was what they told the kids. We asked him to explain. He didn't want to, but after some coaxing he told us about a camp in the 60s, out in the woods, not church-affiliated, not county-run. He didn't know who ran it, but he'd heard whispers growing up, said they took difficult kids, ones who didn't fit in, the kind that were too loud or too different. Nobody knew what happened out there, but people in town used to say that if your kid misbehaved, they'd end up in the quiet program. Morales and I didn't sleep that night. A week later, the forensic report came back. Soil under the bus showed signs of being moved. Not just the bus, the ground itself. Topsoil displacement, roots cut and regrown, like the bus had been placed atop something buried. We brought in cadaver dogs. They alerted. 3 separate spots around the bus, all shallow, all disturbed. We dug, found bone fragments, children's sizes, skulls too small to be adult, jawbones with missing baby teeth. In total, 14 different sets of remains were recovered. Only one could be positively identified. A boy reported missing in 1968. Case closed as a runaway. Family moved away 2 years later. No one looked for him after that. DNA testing on the shoes and bus surfaces came up with partial hits, but no recent matches. No one alive had come forward. No parents, no siblings. It was like those kids were erased. We sealed the site, marked it federal. Didn't let the press near it, because we still don't know who did it, who ran it, or how it was hidden this long. But I'll tell you what keeps me up. The last entry we found, scratched into the roof of the bus above the back seat, so faint we almost missed it. A name, Miss Mara, followed by, she's still in the woods. We don't know who that is, but since the day we cleared that site, hikers have been reporting something. A woman, in a faded skirt, watching from a distance, never moving, always silent, and every single witness, without hearing about the case, uses the same words to describe her presence. She made me feel small. I was the responding deputy on what was supposed to be a routine wellness check. A neighbor had called in, said she hadn't seen the man next door, Richard Crane, in over a week. No lights on, mail piling up, trash untouched. She also said quietly, like she was scared to say it too loud, "Sometimes I hear kids crying, but there aren't any kids who live there." Dispatch flagged it as low priority. Crane was in his late 50s, lived alone, no history of health issues or law enforcement contact. I figured it'd be another welfare call where the guy's on a bender or visiting family without telling anyone. When I pulled up, the front lawn was overgrown, mailbox stuffed full, curtains drawn. I knocked. No answer. I knocked louder. Still nothing. As I turned to head back to the cruiser, I heard it, faint, muffled, crying, high-pitched, childlike, coming from inside the house. It stopped me cold. I stepped back up and knocked again. Harder this time. "Sheriff's office, Mr. Crane?" The crying didn't stop, just looped. A weird rhythm to it. No changes in pitch, no breathing in between, like it wasn't real. I called it in, requested backup, and got permission to enter. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the place was spotless. Dustless, actually. Like someone had been cleaning obsessively. Air was stale. No food out. No clutter. Just furniture placed too precisely. The crying got louder as I moved deeper into the house. It was coming from the basement. But the door was nailed shut. 3 thick, rusted nails hammered straight into the frame. No knob, no lock. Just sealed like someone wanted it never opened again. I backed away. The crying continued. I called for a pry bar. When it arrived, it took us 10 minutes to get that door open. The nails didn't want to budge, like they'd been in place for years. The second the wood cracked, the crying stopped. Just gone. We opened the door. Stairs led down into darkness. We flipped the light switch. Nothing. I went down with a flashlight. The basement was unfinished. Concrete walls, cold floor, no insulation. And in the far corner, a single wooden chair. On it sat a battery-powered speaker, still warm, connected to a looping micro SD player. We popped it open. The file name was roomtonechildren.wav. That was it. No other electronics, no power cords, no signal boosters, just a speaker in a nailed-shut room playing the sound of children crying. On repeat. We called Crane in, found him 2 days later, staying at a motel 2 towns over. He didn't resist, just stared at us like we were ghosts. Said he left because he couldn't sleep. Said the crying wouldn't stop. When we asked what he meant, he denied knowing anything about the speaker. Said he didn't have kids. Never did. Didn't recognize the device. Didn't know why the door was nailed shut. But he admitted something else. Said he bought the house from a woman named Diane Schofield. We looked her up. She lived there 20 years ago, no kids on record. Sold the house quickly after her husband passed in what was labeled an accidental fall down the basement steps. The file was thin. Too thin. When we dug deeper, we found an incident report from a neighbor in 2003, complaining of hearing unexplained child noises through the walls. Same phrasing. No follow-up. We tried contacting Diane. She passed away in a care home last year. But we found a note in her intake file, written in her own handwriting. 4 words. Don't open the basement. We sent the speaker for analysis. No fingerprints. The crying audio was traced to a royalty-free sound effects database used by video game developers and horror podcasts. But no one could explain why it was in that house, or who set it up. Crane was never charged. We couldn't prove intent, and he passed a psych eval. Barely. He sold the house and left the state. Last I heard, he lives in a studio apartment, no basement, no windows, just 4 walls, and a deadbolt he checks 7 times a night. The new owners of the house, they gutted it. Ripped out the stairs, the walls, everything down to the dirt. Said they were going to install a wine cellar. A few weeks ago, I ran into the contractor they hired. He looked tired, pale. Said every time they dug, their equipment would short out, and 2 of his guys quit after claiming they saw something move in the far corner, where the chair used to be. He laughed it off, but as he walked away, he asked me, "You ever hear a sound so wrong it makes your teeth hurt?" And yeah, I have. It started as a welfare check. Old farmer named Clyde Wexler, lived alone, mid-70s. Owned about 60 acres of farmland out past Route 12, most of it left to rot. The kind of man who kept to himself so long people forgot he was still around. Nobody had seen him in nearly 3 years. His mail didn't pile up because he never got any. No utilities, no taxes paid electronically. Property was fully paid off in the 90s. No family, no friends, just land, fences, and an old house slowly sinking into the dirt. But last week, someone from the electric co-op tried to verify the grid connection for a barn behind his house. Said the place was still drawing power, a lot of it. Enough to run industrial refrigeration. That's what triggered the check. Deputy Lunsford and I were dispatched. We figured it'd be a wellness call that ended with a call to the coroner. Elderly man, remote location, heat wave. Chances were he'd passed quietly and no one noticed. We were half right. The front door was locked. No response, no movement inside. The place smelled like mildew and spoiled feed. Dust on the windows, cobwebs in the eaves. We circled around back and found the barn. Big structure. Steel framed, newer than the house. The padlock on the door was rusted but still functional. We cut it. The second we stepped inside, the cold hit us. Not just from outside air, from within. And the sound. Low, constant humming. Rows of chest freezers. 13 of them. All plugged in. All locked shut with padlocks. Each labeled with masking tape and a number. No names, no notes. Just 1 through 13. And in the corner, a chair. Fold out. Facing the row of freezers. Behind it, a wall of journals stacked high. Spiral bound. Labeled with dates stretching back over 2 decades. We radioed it in and waited for a warrant. When we finally got the green light and pried open the first freezer, what we found stopped the room. Inside, a body. Frozen solid. Perfectly preserved. Female, mid-30s. Dressed in casual clothes, hands clasped over her stomach like she'd been posed. No signs of violence, no visible wounds. Just the glassy sheen of someone frozen alive, or very shortly after death. Each of the other freezers held the same. One body. different genders, ages, ethnicities. Some dressed in formal wear, some barefoot, one in a nurse's uniform, all frozen, all posed. None of them reported missing in our jurisdiction, no local hits. We ran DNA. 7 of them matched open missing persons cases from different states, spanning nearly 15 years. The others? Still unknown. The journals held meticulous notes, inventory logs, dates of acquisition, ritual phrases like, "She was calm, he wasn't." Took longer than I expected. Always say their name before you close the lid. Some entries had names and locations, handwritten travel logs, maps with notes like quiet and loud house, and best time equals just before dusk. One page had a list, crossed out lines, 14 total names. The first 13 matched the freezer numbers. The 14th, Clyde Wexler. His own name. We never found him. Not in the house, not in the barn, not in the surrounding woods. But the last entry in the journal was dated 2 weeks prior. Time to go home. I'll know when I'm cold enough. We don't know what that means. The property's since been seized and sealed. State took over. Federal agents involved. One of the bodies matched a case from Connecticut that had gone cold for 8 years. We were told not to comment to the press. But I'll tell you this, freezer 13 was empty when we found it. Door still open. Power still humming. Like it had been waiting. And after the discovery made the rounds, we got a voicemail at the station. No number. Distorted audio. Just one phrase repeated over and over. Make room for 14. We don't know where it came from. We don't know where Wexler went. But I have a theory. I think he knew he was being watched. I think he planned it. I think whoever, or whatever, he was collecting for, he gave himself to it. As payment. As proof. And maybe that's why the last freezer was left open. A message, a warning, or a reservation.